Hey, I can finally get this to work. Hello, hello, hello to everyone out there in, I guess, Viewerland? I don't know. I don't know where I was going with that. But I have an exciting show for you. I realize I am a day late and, well, a couple of hours late and a day late on the show this week, but you will notice that everything behind me looks completely different, and that is actually why I was late on everything. I wound up inadvertently winning a very awesome, massive desk at an estate sale. It's a $3,500 wood desk and like L-shaped professional wood desk. I picked it up for 30 cents. I kid you not. It took me about 3 hours to disassemble it because it's so big and so heavy, get it into my truck. And then with the help of my buddy Riley, we managed to get it up here. And it took me about an hour and a half to get it put back together and get everything set up. You will also notice that I finally have my Gun Jesus poster up behind me there with all of the patents and some more patents kind of down over here. I've got a perfect setup now, and this should get me rocking and rolling. But without further ado, this week, we have Bad Touch Biden thinking that James Bond is apparently a documentary. The Bluegrass State finally gets their constitutional carry. New York's hoplohpobes decide to subtly modify around the law to keep their Canadian-style baby from going bye-bye. The poor Kiwi swine are having problems finding guns without registration, which I gotta say I feel so bad about for them. Kiwi swine. And then, of course, Trump doesn't like suppressors, so the left is going to go ahead and make a move against them. And who could forget our wonderful Florida man of the week. So welcome again to my live show. It is a train wreck you just can't look away from. It's Anarchist Weapons Wednesday, everybody. All right, so first of all, via the Daily Caller, one of the crazier ones this week, Joe Biden apparently thinks that DNA-operated guns actually exist. Former Vice President Joe Biden sure is a fiction fan, and so much, in fact, that he's conjuring up spy theater as his presidential campaign gun control answer. And I wish I was making this up, but the sad truth is the leader for the Democratic nomination for the presidency is betting on special effects and compelling storylines to set America's Second Amendment policies. His latest idea was that gun manufacturers already have the capability to produce DNA-activated firearms, capable of only firing by those who have a biological match. So I'm a little confused. I think they probably are too. I didn't think James Bond was a documentary, personally, but apparently it is. Now, his remarks on the subject were delivered to about 180 donors from New York City's Upper East Side this last weekend. Quote, "If I get elected president of the United States of America with your help, if that happens, guns, we have the capacity now in a James Bond style." I'm just a James Bond style to make sure no one can pull a trigger unless the DNA and fingerprints is on it. Yep. That seems entirely plausible, doesn't it? Now, I've watched James Bond films. In fact, his quirky inventor Q was clever, but we all knew his technology is pure fantasy and imagination, at least generally at the time that it's filmed. Biden is neither quirky nor fun. Ugh. So, he's basically just wrong. And this isn't Joe's first shot at guns. It's also not the first time that Shotgun Joe, or Bad Touch Biden, as I like to call him, has been a little maybe off target with his gun advice. I think that we all remember his poor advice during a Facebook town hall event when he said that no one needs to own an AR-15, a modern sporting rifle, and told his audience his advice to the man's wife, Jill, who was asking the question, was to, quote, buy a shotgun and then proceed to blindly fire 2 blasts into the air. Aside from being grossly irresponsible, it's incredibly, wildly illegal. In fact, it is so illegal that if you even fire a single blast into the air, chances are you're going to prison yourself there, bucko. Even if you're Vice President of the United States, Joe. Now, Biden went on to tell his preening donors that DNA-activated firearms technology could already be part of the American gun culture if it weren't for them pesky gun manufacturers who he says want to stop it from happening. Again, it's very imaginative, but it's still not true, Joe. The National Shooting Sports Foundation, the Firearms Industry Trade Association, doesn't oppose the development of authorized user technology, but it obviously does oppose mandates to adopt such technology because it's unproven and it's unreliable. Biden knows this too, or at least he probably should. He was named by President Barack Obama in 2012 to lead a task force to propose gun control solutions, and in the end, Biden's task force proposed 23 executive actions, including exploration of, quote, gun safety technologies. He already explored this. You would think that he would know that this stuff doesn't actually exist, but apparently not. So if Biden is headed the task force to initiate so-called smart guns for widespread use, what happened to that? I mean, President Obama promised the government would put its weight behind developing these guns, and it turns out the plotline on this one is pretty thin. The National Institute of Justice studied the technology that exists to unlock a gun, even after investing $12.6 million in gun safety technology research over the past 15 years, and the result was literally, no exaggeration, this is a direct quote, none were successful. Not a single firearms technology was in fact successful for this smart gun thing. They simply don't work. Biden also must have missed the memo that the real reason so-called smart guns haven't been flying off the shelves is also because no one wants them. Just 5% of those participating in a recent study said they would consider purchasing a gun with authorized user technology. A full 70% said they had reliability concerns, and they should. Firearms are not just for target shooting and hunting. They are self-defense tools, and in a life or death moment, they must work each and every time as intended. There is no room for a second attempt at a fingerprint match or a battery failure. And all of that is, of course, ignoring the fact that, let's say you're a concealed carrier, you're incapacitated during some sort of a shootout, and you need somebody to pick up your gun and continue the fight. Well, if this fingerprint technology and this alleged smart technology that Biden is apparently so convinced exist, yeah, if that actually existed and that was instituted onto the guns, you wouldn't be able to hand your gun off to your wife. You wouldn't be able to hand your guns off to any bystander who might be able to pick up the fight and continue to defend people because the gun won't work for them. And on top of that, as I covered on a previous episode, in fact, I think maybe my very first episode about the fingerprint scanner things, if you go ahead and watch the film Shoot 'Em Up, you're going to see why there may in fact be a slight issue with the fingerprint thing too, even for security. The GAO, the Government Accountability Office, took a look at programs that work and cited programs like the NSSF's Project Child Safe as a model to be followed. To date, the firearms industry has distributed more than 38 million gun safety kits, including locks, to more than 15,000 LEO agencies across the entire country, and this is just one of the solutions that might make communities safer. But bear in mind, gun safety starts young. Gun safety starts with being around firearms, with learning about firearms in a way that you can only do when there are firearms in the home and when the child is using them and is interacting with them. You can't isolate kids from guns and expect them to know anything about them. And in fact, what we see with studies over and over and over again is we see all of these studies that find that children who are raised with guns tend to have fewer accidents. They tend to regard guns less as toys and more as tools, and are therefore safer. And guess what, Bad Touch Biden? That's not a fucking fiction. That's real. So the next one that I want to go ahead and bring up is in Kentucky. And with a new law, gun owners in Kentucky no longer need a concealed carry permit. Close to 200 laws are taking effect by the end of the month across Kentucky. And one of them, Senate Bill 150, allows Kentuckians to carry concealed weapons without an additional permit. That is it being signed right there. So bravo to Kentucky. The bill allows Kentuckians to carry a concealed weapon without a permit or training. Josh McFadden, who teaches gun safety classes, said while he wants every gun owner to be trained, he wants people to be able to practice their rights freely. He said, quote, "I'm against compelling folks to do things, to get a license to operate, to do what they want to do, to practice their rights." Right on. That's right. Hey, Josh McFadden, I agree with you, sir. He told that to Lexington 18, which I think is their Fox station. Two law enforcement officers in Powell County believe everyone should have the right to bear arms, but are against this new law. Big surprise that the boys in blue might possibly oppose the idea of people being able to carry at will. Because that's the entire reason the Second Amendment exists, right? It exists not because the deer might take over. It doesn't exist because the right to target shoot and hunt was important. It was to shoot at oppressive government. It was to shoot at the agents of that oppressive government. And that includes the cops, which is why cops are not really big fans of a bunch of people being able to carry guns. Deputy Eddie Barnes told Lex 18, "Anytime that you pack a firearm, I think that you should be trained. Am I against, everybody packing a gun? No, I'm not, but I would truly love for you to be trained," he said. Just because, look, to address that, just because you are able to practice your constitutional right and your human right to conceal carry a firearm does not mean that you are untrained at all. All it means is that the government doesn't get to take your right away from you and then sell it back to you at whatever cost and training levels they decide. It means that you get that right, it's recognized, and you can use it. Now, don't get me wrong, you are still obligated to go out and get training and get experience with your firearm. You have an obligation, a true, serious obligation to know how to use the weapons that you have, especially if you're concealed carrying. Because should you be called on to utilize those, it is going to be life or death. And if you screw that up, because you didn't train, because you didn't bother, to learn how to use the gun, then why are you carrying the gun in the first place? You're arguably more dangerous carrying it without training. But again, that does not mean that the government gets to require that people learn how to use their guns. They don't get to require jack shit. It's the Second Amendment. Right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. I do want to mention as well that McFadden did mention, that he also thought that you should probably be trained. Now, I also want to mention as well here, while we're on this subject, Kentucky makes 16 total states that recognize the constitutional right to concealed carry. Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas. I got it on the screen. If you're only listening to the audio, go ahead and maybe look at your screen here, because it's too small for even me to read, and I don't remember all of them offhand. But those are the 16 states in which you now have the constitutional right to carry a firearm for your personal protection. There is a minor exception here in Montana. Montana has sort of kind of murky stuff along those lines. If you're in Montana or planning on traveling there, I really, really, really highly recommend that you look really in depth into the laws there, because holy crap. And, I'm obviously not a lawyer. So, next down our wonderful list here is the New York City bullshit. I know, New York City, guns, bullshit, whoever would guess, right? New York City, their limits on transporting guns have been eased in an effort to avoid a Supreme Court challenge. What a shocker. New York City announced Friday it has amended rules restricting where licensed guns can be taken outside the home, a move that is intended to prompt the Supreme Court to dismiss a challenge from gun rights groups. The change, posted on a city website with zero fanfare or notification or anything else, allows gun owners to take their firearms to a home, business, or shooting range outside city limits. Until now, the city had limited those with possession licenses to 7 shooting ranges inside the city. So, to recap here, up until this modification, because there's a Supreme Court challenge, if you owned guns in New York City, and you had to get a license in order to even do that, but if you did, you couldn't actually remove the guns from your home to go anywhere but those 7 shooting ranges. So let's say you have a friend in upstate, and there's a shooting range there, and you want to go shoot with him. You were not previously allowed to be transporting that firearm between your home and that shooting range. So you could have the gun because they got the constitutional challenge on their gun ban as it was, lost it, obviously, because the Second Amendment exists, and then their solution was to say, well, fine, we can't tell you that you can't have them, but you're not allowed to transport them in the city unless you're going to these few places. Even if you're going to go outside the city to use it, you're not allowed to take it where you want. Ignoring the fact that this violates the Commerce Clause and a bunch of other crap, but still, that was their solution. Gun owners who sought to take their firearms to second homes, shooting ranges outside the city, had challenged the rules in federal court, but the rules were upheld last year by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit, because, big surprise, the Second Circuit doesn't like guns. Hey! The Supreme Court agreed in January to hear the case next fall. Gun control groups had urged the city to change its rules in hopes that a quick surrender would prompt the justices to simply drop the case. Mostly because what they're hoping to avoid is a complete teardown of their restrictions on weapons transport. If they can avoid that, then they at least get to keep that little bit, and they can say, oh, well, you can own them, but you just basically can't move them. However, if it goes to the Supreme Court, based on a lot of the rulings lately and the fact that most of SCOTUS right now is at least allegedly pro-firearm and conservative. If it goes to SCOTUS, you may potentially be looking at that entire ban getting torn apart, and now they can't even regulate the transport within the city limits. Not that it's doing anything anyway, because, surprise, surprise, criminals don't actually listen to where they are and are not allowed to move weapons. The city's police department held a public hearing last month on the proposed changes and announced a final rule Friday. It takes effect in 30 days. The police department reviewed the rules and determined that it was possible to modify them to reflect a carefully considered accommodation to the interests of licensees while also ensuring the safe transport of handguns. So, again, to recap here, it wasn't the legislature that met and altered the law, it was the police by fiat that altered it. It was also the police by fiat who made it in the first frickin' place. The Supreme Court challenge has become a rallying cry for gun rights groups seeking a major expansion of the court's Second Amendment precedents. Now that the rules have been changed, it's not clear whether the case will even actually be heard. Gun rights groups have argued in court papers that the justices should not dismiss the case regardless of any changes. The New York State Rifle and Pistol Association, which brought the case against the city, accused it of a nakedly transparent effort to evade this court's review by moving to ease the restrictions. The Cato Institute, which I'm sure many of my viewers are well aware of, which is a libertarian group favoring gun rights, warned that the rules could be changed, quote, just long enough for the case to be dismissed, end quote, which is entirely probable. I'm completely in agreement with the Cato Institute here. Chances are what's going to happen is they are going to alter the rules, because remember, the police department can alter these rules, so they can actually change the rules by fiat, just declare them different, and then when the Supreme Court drops the case, they can then go, oh, sorry, did we say that you could move it? Nah, never mind. Because remember, it takes a while for this case to work its way up there. And if the Supreme Court decides not to hear it, then they're stuck, right? But if the Supreme Court does decide to hear it, then it can move forward. So what would happen is, if they undo it and then the Supreme Court says never mind, any new group that wants to take that case to SCOTUS is now going to have to file an entirely new case, and they're going to be fighting against the existing jurisprudence that's already happened from this case. So it's a really carefully orchestrated move by Mr. Jackass and his jackass friends. Seen here, doing a white power move, allegedly. Adam Winkler, a UCLA School of Law professor and author of a book on the gun rights battle, said the challengers only sought an injunction to stop New York's rules from being enforced. If repealed, he said the case should be moot because the challengers will have effectively won. However, again, as I recapped, he's an idiot and wrong. And he's from UCLA, so it's not like he's pro-gun. He wasn't doing this research on it academically from a neutral ground. He was doing it because he wanted to show that gun rights people are nuts, because that's what all those idiots think. We're all a bunch of crazies. We're not. The effort by gun rights groups to get a case before the Supreme Court is based on the hope that its new 5-member conservative majority will be more sympathetic to gun rights, in much the same way that anti-abortion groups are hoping for a high court crackdown on what some people label reproductive rights. I'm not getting into that. But it's been more than a decade since the Supreme Court ruled that the Second Amendment protects the right of citizens to keep guns in homes for self-defense. The justices have since extended that right to states and localities, basically meaning that you can't ban the right to own guns, period. You just can't. Associate Justice Antonin Scalia's most famous opinion, however, in DC v. Heller, never defined the breadth of that right. He acknowledged the ruling did not uphold, quote, a right to keep and carry any weapon whatsoever in any manner whatsoever for whatever purpose. Again, don't think, if you're an anarchist, don't think that the Supreme Court is going to rule in favor of what you want, ever, or that the Second Amendment is ever going to be seen to actually protect real gun rights. The best you're ever going to get out of this is you're going to get, okay, well, you can have them. That's all you're going to get. You're never going to be able to just carry a shoulder-fired friggin' missile launcher or mount a Mark 19 on your truck. That's never going to happen, which is a great tragedy in my opinion. I personally would really like a Mark 19 mounted on my truck. Great for traffic jams. Where was I? Oh, yes. Gun rights groups, allegedly led by the NRA, have sought for years to win the next battle, a broad right to carry weapons outside the home. 45 states allow that to some degree, though 15 require special licenses or permits. But several large states, including California, Florida, Illinois, and New York, have prohibitions on carrying weapons at all. They are not, shall not issue states, basically. Technically, they're not, but again. The High Court has refused for nearly a decade to jump back into this gun debate, declining at least 8 separate opportunities in the past few years. It let stand Chicago's semi-automatic weapons ban and a variety of prohibitions against carrying guns in public from New Jersey to California. It refused to second-guess age limits for carrying guns in Texas and rules for disabling or locking guns when not in use in San Francisco. I realize that may come as a bit of a shock, but the Supreme Court doesn't care about our rights, really? What? I love that. I love that graphic. Anyway, new gun rights groups hope Associate Justice Brett Kavanaugh's replacement of Associate Justice Anthony Kennedy, the court's swing vote, could turn the tide. So basically what's happening here, the gist of this, is that they are skirting the law, the Constitution and SCOTUS jurisprudence via slight modifications, which only proves bans on things don't work, like bans on gun bans. By way of comparison, may I reference to you the utter irony of the featureless rifle, and how many parallels there are here. Because gun makers work around weapons so that they don't include banned features in places like California. They slightly modify them to prevent them from being banned. They adhere to the letter of the law, such as the fixed stocks or pinned muzzle brakes instead of some sort of flash hider, because usually flash hiders are not allowed and only muzzle brakes are, and they have to be pinned, so you get that. Fin grips that don't allow the over the thumb grip on them, which you see in the lower picture there. The upper one gets around that because the buffer tube and the stock don't actually connect, which is kind of weird. And then of course, because California has a 10 round mag limit, and you're not allowed to do the quick change. What they've actually done now is you're not allowed to change a mag you're not allowed to change the mag unless the action has to be temporarily broken to change out the magazine, is I think the way the law reads. So their method for that is that they took that rear takedown pin and turned it into a release button. So I don't know if you've seen it yet, but if you haven't, you take a look at the AR-15s that have this feature, and when you want to drop your mag, they have a lock so that the mag is stuck in there when it's in, but when you want to drop your mag, you push this, it actually breaks the AR apart at the upper and lower receivers. So, grab a lower receiver here. This pin back here turns into your mag release. So what happens is when you hit this, the top part is going to pivot forward naturally because now it's being released and it's kind of front heavy because it's got a great big barrel, right? So it comes up. When that happens, the action has been broken. The weapon cannot fire. And your mag drops free. You slap a new mag in, it latches, slap that back down, and you're ready to rock and roll again. It's not quite as good as having a mag release right here, but it still works, and it does adhere to the law, right? So the irony here is that the pro-gun people and the anti-gun people are using exactly the same tactics to just work around the law very subtly. However, one's doing it in the name of freedom, the gun makers, although realistically they should just say, screw you, I'm not going to modify my gun, bite me. The other ones are doing it to try and get around a bunch of laws that are telling them that legally they aren't they aren't allowed to ban things the way that they're choosing to ban things. The irony is palpable, and I mean they're completely equivalent in what they're trying to do here. Now we're gonna head south. Well, I mean I'm gonna head south when I'm talking. That sounds dirty. We're gonna head south because New Zealand cops are complaining that lack of registration makes rounding up guns a little difficult. Those poor Kiwi pigs. You like that? That's a Kiwi pig. Hoplohpobes and tin pot dictators are working to create registrations and licensing schemes throughout the United States. While a federal registration is unlikely anytime soon, they are happening at state levels already, and worse than that, the numbers may be slowly creeping up. However, opponents of registration, such as, myself, note that the only thing such laws actually lead to is gun confiscation. You can't come steal guns from people if you don't know where those guns are in the first place. Now can you? Anti-gun voices tend to call that being paranoid. Based on what I'm hearing out of New Zealand, though, it seems to me it's more like being prescient. Chris Cahill, of the Kiwis Police Association. Oop. I'll find my scene. Give me a minute. There we go. Said it's not clear if this year's budgeted funding for the buyback would be adequate because New Zealand, like the United States, does not have an official gun registry. Quote, we really have no idea how many of these firearms are out there in New Zealand, Cahill told the Herald. Which really points to how bad, this is a direct quote, which really points to how bad our firearms legislation has been that we have let this get out of control. Yeah. Letting citizens own the means to defend themselves without government control and permission via licensure and registration? Gosh, how awful. Now, you know just how precious the human right to keep and bear arms. There we go. To keep and bear arms, as named in the Second Amendment of the Constitution of the United States, really is, as well as how unique of a governing document that is in the world. In the United States, you are and you remain the only country in the entire world that officially recognizes firearms ownership as an inalienable right, not to be controlled or taken away by tyrannical government. I realize by saying tyrannical government, I repeat myself. In any event, as News Target reported earlier this month, only a few hundred guns had been turned into police at the time. According to authorities, just 530 or so rifles had been turned in out of about 250,000 licensed firearm holders who own as many as about 300,000 now illegal guns. First of all, allow me to address those in New Zealand holding onto their guns. Good on you, sir. I would not be giving up mine either. Secondly, let me just go ahead and point out that Cahill explicitly notes that the police are going to have difficulties because police don't know how many are out there as they go door to door. That is what he calls it, getting out of control. He's saying that registration would just make it so much easier to take your guns. But we're all paranoid, right? About the gun registration. And to be fair, he is right. Registration would sure help them out. But again, only to a point. The only people who would have registered firearms would be those who don't represent a risk in the first damn place, the criminal element. The people who are ostensibly the issue here in New Zealand, they would hardly have ever bothered. They never have before. They're not about to now, and it's just simply not what they do. I realize this may come as a shock, but the criminals tend not to just tell people what guns they have. I realize that this may, in fact, be shocking. And don't forget, there's an entire group of Maori gangs in New Zealand who flat out announced publicly that they were refusing to give up their AR-15s and other modern sporting rifles. They said, yes, we have them, and no, we're not giving them up. While Americans are talking about gun registries like it's some great and all-encompassing answer to what is really a mental health and cultural problem, let's all remember the real reason many of them want it. They believe they'll eventually get to take our guns from us, leaving us wholly defenseless from their further tyrannical machinations. And to do that, they need a list of which doors to kick in first. That is what this all boils down to. Now, no, not every registration proponent is thinking that. Some legitimately are just really dumb and naive enough to believe it'll somehow stop bad people from doing bad things, but far too many of them do believe that. Hard fucking pass. If the American government wants to take away our ability, mine, yours, your loved ones, to defend ourselves from them, personally, I see no reason at all to make it easy on them. If they really want to come door to door and take our guns, hey, they can give it a shot. So will I. Next, I have one more that I really want to cover before we do Florida Man, because it ties back into things that I've been saying for quite some time. Suppressors. A New Jersey Democrat plans to introduce a bill to the U.S. Senate that would largely ban legal suppressors nationwide and then simply use taxpayer money to reimburse owners. So just like with the Trump's bump stock ban, he doesn't just want to ban them going forward, he wants to confiscate them. And it's important to note that until Trump decided to do that with the bump stocks, no one had ever even attempted that in the United States. No one had ever banned guns and then not allowed them to be possessed after the ban had they been purchased prior. You saw that with the NFA, with machine guns. You saw that even with the GCA. You saw that with FOPA that Reagan signed into law with the Hughes Amendment in '86. Even that said that if you already had it, they weren't going to take it away. And then Trump comes along. He bans bump stocks by fiat. And then says, oh, by the way, we're going to confiscate them because it's now a felony to even possess them. And now he has emboldened these lawmakers to do the same thing. And not only that, but he specifically said he didn't like suppressors. And now they're going after suppressors. Exactly what we warned, and all the FUDs. Oh, and the Trump worshippers, all of the Trumpkins out there. Oh, well, let me know when something actually happens to ban suppressors, because apparently they only care about their rights once they've lost them. And now, exactly what we warned them would happen is happening. Senator Bob Menendez last week announced his plan to introduce his terms, or what he terms the, get this, Help Empower Americans to Respond Act, or HEAR Act. Yeah. Because, gun reports, they totally contribute to good hearing. I'm living proof of that one. He plans to just introduce that when Congress goes back to work. On Monday, he introduced it. His bill would reportedly provide some narrow exceptions for, quote, certain current and former law enforcement personnel and others, while outlawing more than 1 million currently legal suppressors in the United States. And again, narrow exceptions. Remember, there are tons of police departments that are clamoring for suppressors on all of their officers' weapons to help their officers maintain their hearing. The same reason that the FPC and a bunch of other groups are trying to push for suppressors to be legalized outside of the NFA is because they help with hearing. They don't actually make a gun silent. They just make it hearing safe. In fact, suppressors were patented in the early 1900s. This is a copy of H.P. Maxim's original patent. Because I'm cool like that. What he says, silencers undermine public safety. They undermine the ability of law enforcement to do their jobs. And they undermine the ability of Americans in the midst of mass shootings to survive. Literally one guy ever has used a suppressor in a mass shooting, but okay, sure. And it said, no one needs a silencer to defend themselves or their home, but everyone needs to be able to hear when their lives are in danger, and that's exactly what the HEAR Act will do. Hearing when your life is in danger is kind of, important, but how are you going to hear if you go deaf from the gunshots? Is he under the impression that, oh, no, the guns are only loud when bad people use them? Now, the suppressors were first introduced commercially in 1909. I showed you the patent by H.P. Maxim, Hiram Percy Maxim, the son of the machine gun Maxim. And he actually invented those and then decided they might work out for other things and used the same principle for car mufflers thereafter. He's also the inventor of the car muffler. He dubbed them silencers as a marketing gimmick. In fact, the company that actually manufactured them was called the Maxim Silent Arms Company. Now, if you've ever fired a gun with a can, it ain't silent, let me tell you. Now, there's some exceptions. For instance, a 22 with subsonic ammunition and a large enough suppressor is fairly quiet, but the action itself working is still going to come in over 100 decibels. The suppressors are designed for use in moderating the noise of a firearm's muzzle blast. The devices could be purchased over the counter at the time and via mail order until the NFA in 1934. While Maxim's company later went out of business, today there are hundreds of suppressor makers of all sizes, and as of February 2018, 1,489,791 million are on the NFA and the transfer record. And out of those 1.5, just shy of 1.5 million suppressors, one has been used in a mass shooting. 1.5 million, one. It's not even a 1 in a million chance that it's going to get used. It's a 1 in 1.5 million chance. It's even rarer. Now, Mendez's office details that his bill would outlaw their private possession or sale and limit the devices to some police use, end quote, for certain authorized testing or experimentation. Where have we heard that before, NFA? Within 90 days after his bill being signed into law, owners that do not meet the guidelines proposed by the career politician, again, no knowledge of firearms whatsoever, would have to forfeit their suppressors to the government, but they would be reimbursed through the Justice Department. A grant for bolstering small-town law enforcement would be used. So they're going to steal your money and then use it to buy something you legally purchased from you under threat of being thrown in a cage or murdered for having it. You know, it's funny that he mentions need, considering I don't remember the word need in the Second Amendment. Notably, Mendez represents one of 8 states that had long had a state ban on suppressors. New Jersey. So the impact of his legislation would fall primarily outside of New Jersey, which he does not represent and has no major interest in. For reference, the 4 states that have the highest number of legal and registered suppressors are Texas at about 266,000, Florida just under 99,000, Georgia at just under 73,000, and Utah at almost 52,000. National Firearms and Suppressors trade industry groups say that Mendez is ill-informed and far off base when it comes to his rhetoric on suppressors, which have been highly regulated for 85 years already. Would-be suppressor owners must file paperwork with the NFA under federal guidelines with federal regulators. It includes submitting fingerprints, a photograph, a background check process has to be done. You have to pay a $200 tax stamp, which is non-refundable. And the background check is going to take anywhere between 9 months and a year or 2. You never know. It's a running gag in those of us who deal with firearms that is still waiting on my NFA stamp and, you know, the skeleton sitting on the bench. Almost none have ever been used in crimes. Again, 1 in 1.5 million was used, and now he just wants to go ahead and take away completely the already heavily regulated for nearly 100 years thing. Quote, the senator should spend more time studying up on suppressors instead of watching spy movies to generate restrictions on law-abiding Americans exercising their Second Amendment rights. Mark Oliva, Director of Public Affairs for the National Shooting Sports Foundation, told Guns.com. Olivia noted that in a 10-year period from 1995 to 2005, less than 0.1% of homicides in federal court, and an even lower, prepare this, even lower, 0.00006% of felonies involved the use of a suppressor. In fact, a 2017 white paper by a high-ranking ATF official recommended that the devices be reclassified from under NFA control. And because he said, given the lack of criminality associated with silencers, it does not serve the public good. The NSSF has long backed suppressors as instrumental in helping with gun safety and training, particularly in combating irreparable hearing loss due to the blast and muzzle reports, which peak well over the 140 decibel level, which is where permanent hearing loss begins to occur. Oliva explained that NSSF has in the past offered to take Mendez to the range with other lawmakers to educate them on suppressors. All offers are always refused. Quote, despite his purposely misleading characterizations, the truth is suppressors reduce the sound of a muzzle blast from a decibel level equal to a 747 taking off to that of a jackhammer working. It is clearly still audible and will gain the attention of anyone within the vicinity, which is completely true. Knox Williams, president of the American Suppressor Association, told Guns.com that the devices are a common-sense tool that over 500,000 law-abiding Americans use to help protect their hearing. Suppressors aren't the issue. Misinformation is. He said, quote, it's time we stop listening to the peddlers of misinformation who blame these inert devices for the actions of violent criminals. Senator Mendez's bill does nothing to target criminals. It would, however, put the health and safety of law-abiding Americans at risk. The HERE Act has the support of Bloomberg-financed Moms Demand Action, or the Mad Cows as I like to call them, and Everytown USA, some more Mad Cows. Shannon Watts is a moron, and everyone, David Hogg's involved, I think, with Everytown now, and a bunch of idiots. Anyway, it's those two groups were actually at his announcement and cheering him on. So big surprise there. Earlier this year, Mendez introduced a ban on gun magazines that can hold over 10 rounds, as well as legislation to strengthen regulations on 3D weapons. So the 3D crap that I've posted about where they're trying to ban 3D guns, good luck with that, you can't stop the signal, is also Mendez's. This guy is trying to ban this gun, this thing, that thing with firearms, and he refuses to even go to a range to see what they are, or how they work, or learn anything about them. And you want to tell me that democracy is somehow a good idea when you have a bunch of people making decisions for other people that they don't know anything about? They're just deciding. I mean, imagine if a bunch of Amish people decided to start regulating things about cars. They have no freaking idea. They don't use them. They don't know anything about them. Or if Amish people decide to start regulating the internet or regulating ownership of computers. It's absurd. In January, he introduced a new assault weapons ban because the AWB, didn't work. So let's just go ahead and try that one again. In 94, this idiot also voted for the original AWB when he was a member of the House of Representatives. So this guy is a career politician, a career anti-gun politician who knows nothing about firearms and has never handled firearms and refuses to go learn about firearms, and yet feels like maybe he deserves to be in charge of you. And now we take a moment to enjoy everyone's favorite part of the show, Florida Man. And this week I have a great one for you. Because this week I have a guy who, I kid you not, jumped a canal in a Nissan Versa and landed it, but broke his back. You think he said yeehaw? A driver in Lehigh Acres, Florida has been charged with a hit and run in addition to 2 DUIs after channeling Luke and Bo Duke jumping and clearing his car over a canal. And not just any canal. We're talking about a 20-foot wide canal. 20 feet. In that. I mean, I'm no expert, but there may have been some contingencies here. Anyway, according to NBC2, 35-year-old Robert Foley performed the stunt on 21st Street Southwest last Wednesday night, causing significant damage to the area and hitting a parked truck before fleeing on foot. The canal reportedly measures almost 20 feet. He, quote, this is from a witness who they called Gerald. He's hilarious if you get a chance to watch the video. He thought he was in the Dukes of Hazzard. You ever seen a truck hit another truck on I-75? Kaboom. A witness named Gerald, who lives in the area, told NBC2. He was driving full speed, came across the canal. He landed right here on the bank, as you can see. He hit this truck right here. He got out, started running. I went inside. I was scared. That is a heck of a canal, because where you start to see those lights, that's the other side of it. Super impressive. For video of the aftermath taken by witnesses, although sadly not publicly available. The Versa can apparently be seen abandoned, quote, crumpled in the middle of the street. Police also say that Foley broke his back from the jump. If you're going to be jumping Nissans, the chiropractor in me says a higher riding one like a Kick or a Rogue might have been a better choice. The Florida man reportedly had his license revoked back in 2017. Foley fled the scene. Helicopters were used to find him. He wound up being taken to the hospital to be treated for his broken back. Just last month, a different Florida man led police on a high-speed chase in a Dodge Charger, a modern Dodge Charger that was painted to look like the classic one, the actual General Lee from Dukes of Hazzard. Although he didn't make any jumps that day, the chase did happen shortly after he set fire to his wife's home. So, you know, there's that. But that is all that I have for you guys at this point. Definitely appreciate you sticking with me, and I appreciate any patience with me for not getting it done on time. I had a ton of stuff to move up here. I had all of this to do to get the new setup done. 4 videos from here on out, and that's pretty much a wrap. You guys stay safe, stay real, laugh to heal. And I will see you guys on Sunday night. Hopefully, you'll join us on Anarchy Among Friends Roundtable Discussion, where we talk about all things anarchy related and current events, and have a lot of fun, a lot of laughs. Also, do not forget to check out my sponsor, libertytees.com, which is where I get most of my awesome shirts. This one included. I will throw a link in the comments at this timestamp should you want to get one of these bad boys for yourself. So that's all for me. You guys have a good night. He's just a good old boy, never meaning no harm.